Welcome to the Grove Podcast, where we feature Evergreen members and their real-life stories of salvation, transformation, struggle, and hope. I'm Joy Gabbert, and today we have Johnny Crater. Welcome to the Grove.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, excited to share what God's done in my life.
Good. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you're involved at Evergreen?
Yeah, so I have been married 3.5 years to my lovely wife, Janae, and we've been at Evergreen almost 5 years now. I think it'll be 5 years in September, and we just love it here. God has worked a miraculous way to get us here, and we love the community. And currently I'm serving on the media ministry team, the leadership team specifically, and then I'm the producer for the upper room, and then soon to be the venue when that is open. So
that's exciting.
Yeah.
I like to hear when people are serving on the media team, because that's my husband's area,
Yes.
and we need more people.
Yeah.
So if you're listening and you want to join the media team, please do that.
Yeah.
Because we need help. Okay, so why don't we just jump on into your story? Tell me about your childhood and the beginnings, like even before you were born.
Before I was born, yeah. I love all of my story, but how I came to be with my parents is pretty cool. So my adoptive mother, her name is Debbie, and she had a rough go of it for a long time. She actually miscarried twins, and she had a few different adoptions that fell through. And so really from the time she was a little kid, all she wanted to be was a mom. Mm-hmm. And God really was, I think, growing her patience and trust in him through that process. And she'll even say that now. But the story of how I came to know her is with my birth mother, Shauna, who I have a great relationship with. I've always known I was adopted. Shauna was a couple months pregnant when my birth father left the picture, and she didn't think that she would really be able to take care of me with just her finances. And so she decided to put me up for adoption, and she really wanted to know her child, who, whatever is going to be, boy, girl, she didn't care, but she wanted to maybe get a picture or an update about her kid.
So at least a partial open adoption, if not open. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So my dad, my adoptive dad, being the kind man he actually purchased like a spa day for my mom, Debbie, to go and get her nails done at the place she always went to. But the lady that she normally went to wasn't there that day. Mm-hmm. And so they asked her if she'd be okay meeting with this woman named Shauna. Mm-hmm. And so God brought them together that day, and my mom, Debbie, came in, and Shauna was crying, and she was like, "What's going on?" And Shauna explained that whole story, and my mom was just like, "I've never heard God's voice like more clearly in my life of like, you need to be here." Mm. And so I just can't imagine how forward my mom must have felt, but she basically, in meeting this woman within 30 minutes, was like, "I'd love to talk to you about adopting your child." Mm. So Shauna said yes to having dinner with my parents, and she said that as soon as she met my dad, John, that she knew that this is where she wanted her kid to go. Mm. Part of my testimony and my story, even my own birth mother, who didn't raise me but has been a part of my life, like really showed me Christ-like love from before I was born, of willing to give up her child to be able to have a better life. Yeah. So I was raised in a Christian home. My parents were both very strong believers. I was saved and baptized when I was 8 years old. I definitely was saved, and I know that I was baptized, but I don't think that my walk with Christ really took off until a couple years later. Okay. Moving forward, when I was about a fourth grader, CNN was doing this big expose on the AIDS epidemic in Africa. My mom came in and saw that I was like watching it, and she was like, "Johnny, you don't need to be watching this. Like, let's watch something else." And I was like, "Mom, please." Like, I begged her to watch this because I saw kids and I knew that I was of African descent. So somehow in my mind, I had worked out that
They're just like you.
That, yeah, I could have been there in some weird scenario or whatever. Anyways, so she sat down and she watched it with me. And I just remember seeing videos of kids that were left to take care of their little siblings when they're 7 years old. And they have siblings that are 3 and 2. And, you know, just crazy things that we see in the mission field and just poverty in general. So I turned to my mom and I was like, I want to do something about this. I really want to find a way to help these kids. And so, like any parent, she's like, okay, like, what would you like to do? And the only thing any kid ever knows how to do is run a lemonade stand.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah. So I actually set one up like at our house, which was terrible because we lived at like in South Bixby where there was we weren't in a neighborhood. We were like on 20 acres by ourselves. So I set up a lemonade stand like on the road. Yeah. And like random cars would drive by every like 20 minutes.
Like makes me picture like a Western where the tumbleweed will go by.
Literally. Like
you were trying.
I was trying. Yeah. I had maybe like 3 customers that first day. Anyways, I'm pretty sure my dad just called people and told them to show up. But so my mom, being the mom that she is, she decided to reach out to some of the local Walmarts and Sam's Clubs and see if I could come set up there. And, you know, of course they agree. They have, you know, Girl Scouts out there, all the other things. So why not have this kid raising money? In the small school that I was in at the time, all these other parents started hearing, oh, Johnny's doing like this fundraising thing. I'd love for my kid to do that. And so it went very quickly from just me and my parents to like 20 or 30 kids would show up to a neighborhood Walmart on a Saturday morning and be selling lemonade to people. Yeah. I did that. I probably had 10 or 12 stands like over the course of that next summer that I did. And it just took off way quicker than I thought it would.
Yeah. Did you have like 2 at once at any point? Or?
So we didn't do like multiple locations, but we would set up on like both doors of the Sam's Club and like just, And really I can't imagine. I can't imagine how the people felt too. Like just going into a Walmart and then there's like not 3 little Girl Scouts, but like 30 kids coming up to you asking if you want to buy lemonade or whatever. So
I think that's great.
Yeah, it was fun. It's a good memory. But
remind me how old you were when you were doing this.
So I started out as a 4th grader. So I was 9. I was a young 4th grader.
Okay.
So that was about a year after I got saved and baptized. And as I started doing that, I realized as we were saving this money to try to do something with it, that I was the happiest I had ever felt, at least in my 9 years on this planet. And my parents really kind of ingrained in me, like that feeling you're having is the Holy Spirit, like encouraging you to move forward and
serving others.
Yeah. And serving others and loving other people. Like my dad was like, this is what life is supposed to be like, is caring for other people. And so my dad came from a marketing background, and so he changed the way we did things. Instead of selling the lemonade, we would say, we're giving away free lemonade. Would you like some? So naturally people are like, why are you giving this away for free? And they say, well, we're taking donations for this cause. And at the time it was just to raise money for the AIDS epidemic. It was like a blanket statement.
Yeah.
So it went from selling like a $1 cup to somebody would feel pressured by 30 little kids and give me like a 20 for a single cup of lemonade. Yeah. But it was just cool to see that happen. And so word started getting out. Before I knew it, I was doing like news interviews in the mornings, and there was reporters that would come and interview me at school and like all this other stuff. And so it really grew over a long time. And so we expanded it like outside of summer. And we would start as early as like April and go all the way to like September.
Wow.
So we did that the next year. And then once it got too cold, my mom suggested we sell hot chocolate and hot apple cider. And so then it was like pretty much a year-round thing, like just doing it all the time. But I specifically remember one reporter. I'll never forget this because I don't know why I said it. I mean, I know why I said it. It's the Holy Spirit like speaking through me, but he asked me, like, what is driving you to do this? And I was like, well, I think that God's my partner in all of this. And I feel like my partner wants me to help these kids. I'm sure there are good journalists and bad journalists, just like anything else. But this specific journalist didn't really like that answer. They didn't like the Christian answer. So he kept pressing me. And very stubbornly, I kept saying, well, the exact same thing. No, God's my partner in all this. And I'm going to like glorify him through this and help these kids. And so finally he just kind of gave up, and that ended up getting printed in like the Tulsa World. And I still have like the snippet of it. And it's really cool. Cool memory.
In this process, though, somebody like a bigwig starts to hear about it.
My dad, before they moved back here, he's from Muskogee, but he worked in LA for a long time and made a lot of very high-powered like financial friends. One of them was friends with John Coors of the Coors Brewery. And I know some of you are hearing this and you're like, where's he going with this? But Mr. Coors and the Coors family are actually very big philanthropists. A lot of them are believers. They run some of the largest charities in the world. So Mr. Coors heard about me through one of his friends who is also friends with my dad, and reached out to my mom and basically was like, hey, I've heard about what your son's been doing. I would love to meet him. And so I think my mom thought it was a scam at first. Like she was like really like, who is this talking to me? Like, whatever. There's no way this is, the multimillionaire John Coors.
Yeah.
Comes to find out it's real. So Mr. Coors paid for me and my parents to fly out to Golden, Colorado, and have dinner with his family at their house. And he actually has 8 kids. He had 4 at the time. He might have more now, but 4 adopted kids from different areas of the world and 4 biological children. And every single one of them had their own charity.
Wow.
And like some of them are 4 all the way to like 18-year-olds, but every single one of his kids also had their own charity that they ran themselves. So it was definitely something he was pouring into his kids. But enjoyed dinner with them. And then after dinner, he sat me down and basically said, I love that you've been glorifying God the way that you have. And he said, I want to also be your partner in this. And so he basically told me whatever I raise, he'll match dollar for dollar. And that instead of trying to just give this money to the Red Cross or some other organization, that he would take the funds himself and do with it exactly what I wanted to in Africa. And he would cover, the extra cost of getting supplies over there or whatever, but the money would go 100% to that. And so only God could orchestrate something like that I would get in touch with somebody that has that kind of power and whatever. So
what was it that you guys were able to establish with that?
Yeah. So over the next like 2 years, because I knew I had like 100% return on my funds from John Coors, I was like, okay, like what can we do? What can we do? And so basically I just started every opportunity I had, raising money in different ways. So we had a like penny drive for the elementary school at my school. I had a birthday party at the old Driller Stadium, and the owner of the team had heard about me. And so he gave like a percentage of the proceeds from that night to me.
Wow.
Like a ton of just really cool things that God continued to just bring people to me. The final like event that I did that led to the big thing that I could do in Africa was I tried to like throw this party. Basically, I wanted to charge people to get into this like no alcohol, just big dance party. It's like $10. And I was doing a school drive. This was after the Joplin, Missouri tornado. And so I was trying to raise money and school supplies for them. And it was a huge flop. I mean, I marketed this thing like the best I thought I could, whatever. And like 20 people showed up. And I had invited like probably a couple thousand people.
Yeah.
But we all still hung out, ate food, whatever, kind of joked about how it was a big flop. And at the end of the party, this dad came to pick up their kid, and he pulled me aside and handed me a check for $50,000.
Wow.
And
my goodness,
I couldn't believe it. And we had raised more than that over the last couple of years, but that was the largest like single donation I'd
big
gotten.
Chunk.
The total amount that I raised from 4th grade through 8th grade was just short of $500,000. And so in doing that, the big plan originally was I wanted to like save every orphan in Africa, because kids have big dreams,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
But my parents helped me kind of like whittle it down, like what can we really do here? What can we really do?
Yeah.
And I wanted to build an orphanage, and so that's what we did. I built a 12-kid orphanage in Kenya.
Yeah.
And there was a teacher, there was a nurse, they had 3 square meals a day, and security guards, all the things for these kids, and was able to run that for a couple of years. Were
you ever to go visit?
No. So Mr. Coors actually offered to take me for like a full summer to Africa, but it wasn't anything weird. He basically just wanted to take me with his kids.
Oh, okay.
But he didn't want my parents to come too.
So just a little uncomfortable with it?
Yeah, and my parents weren't comfortable with it. So like, no. And I don't think they thought anything. They just would want their kid to go to Africa without one of them around at 12 years old,
Yeah.
So anyways, so I didn't ever get to go see it, but there was a civil war that broke out in Kenya, and so the kids were in danger. And actually a Holland Hall graduate that I had met a few years prior has his own orphanage in Tanzania, and the kids were moved from Kenya to Tanzania. It was a good 5-year run, and I really, really enjoyed what God allowed me to be a part of in that time. And I got to meet a lot of cool people and make connections that probably would have never happened on my own.
So that lasted through middle school, correct?
Yeah, so like 4th through 8th grade pretty much.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So then tell me what then changed in high school? After
that last party and building an orphanage and stuff, I kind of felt like I had reached a goal, and I was just tired. I really was tired. I just kind of came to my parents one day, and I felt like God still had things for me, but I felt like as I prayed, he was okay with me kind of laying the reins down for a minute. Mm-hmm. And so I came to them and was like, my dad always said it was the cutest thing I ever said to him, and I don't think it was, but I said, is it okay for me to just be like a normal kid? Aww. And they're like, of course. Like, we're never going to push you to do any of this. Like, if you want to be done, you can be done. So, but as I got into high school, I had grown quite a bit. And a lot of the football and wrestling coaches started to kind of take notice of me, and they really wanted me to focus on that. And so I kind of cut out choir, I cut out musicals and plays, and I really pressed into specifically football for almost 3 years of high school. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like it was the blink of an eye. Like, I really don't remember most of my 9th through 11th grade years of school. And after I came out of it, I realized that I had made it out to be like, okay, I did this charity thing for God. Now I'm going to be like an athlete for God. Mm-hmm. But it really was the enemy telling me like, hey, you should lay this down and then pursue this, and you'll become like famous, or you'll become rich or whatever. And so I believed that lie. And, I still went to church, was involved with youth group and all those other things. But I definitely didn't have the close relationship with God that I had like while I was running the charity.
Sure.
As I went into my senior year, I started getting some scholarship offers to play football, and I really kept telling people like, oh, I'm going to be like Tim Tebow. Like, I'm going to, constantly share the gospel with people, whatever, but I wasn't doing that then.
Sure.
And so like looking back, I was like just headed down this bad path of pursuing fame or wealth or influence or whatever without God as my partner in all of it. So, sometimes God has to allow some hard things in your life to get your attention. Mm-hmm. And so after my senior year playing, I was in a wrestling tournament, and long story short, I got in an awkward position and my leg just like snapped. I tore 4 ligaments in my knee and cracked my shin bone all at the same time. And
yikes.
It's extremely painful. But I don't remember most of that night because I felt like I almost passed out a couple times. But after I got home from the hospital and everything, checked out okay, I had to stay in bed for like 2 weeks. Like, they're like, you can be in a wheelchair only, but like no pressure on your leg, whatever. So I stayed at home for 2 weeks, and I think that's the most angry like I've ever been at God.
Because that probably ruined your chances for your football career.
Yeah. So it was kind of a double down too. Like, word gets out really quickly about injuries in the sports world. And so like while I'm in bed with my knee like the size of a volleyball, I'm getting like texts from coaches and stuff like, hey, we're going to have to pull your offer and all this other stuff.
Oh, my word.
Yes.
You would think that they would wait a little bit.
No.
And man.
I don't think they're trying to be insensitive, but, you know. But as I was upset with God, he kept bringing a chapter in John to my mind. And John chapter 15, verses 1 through 6. He says, I am the true vine, and my Father is a gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. And as I read that scripture, like laying in my bed, I realized the time that I'd wasted and that God literally had to prune me through my leg to get my attention. And I hated that. It was just like this sorrow that overwhelmed me that I'd wasted 3 years of high school pursuing a dream or whatever. And it's okay to pursue dreams, but they should be things that are glorifying God and not, seeking to glorify yourself. Yeah. And so, after that, I wanted to use the rest of my senior year the best I could. And so I started trying to like share the gospel with people in school. And, I even had a lot of people just be like, what happened to you? Because like the people that knew me in high school for those first 3 years saw me just try to be like Mr. Jock or Mr. Cool or whatever. And like now I genuinely had a purpose for being kind and caring about others' needs way more than my own. And so I made a lot of really good connections and started, leading worship at church and playing the drums and just trying to find new ways to serve. And I really had like just a complete turnaround, and it literally took God breaking my leg to get my attention. But I'm thankful he did. And I would go through it again if it meant that I was walking in step with him. So after I graduated, I went to Tulsa Community College. Any of you seniors or juniors looking at college, please consider TCC. It may not be the cool option you think it is, but it'll save you a lot of money. But I had to go there because my parents weren't really in the position to help me financially with school, and I didn't want to accrue a ton of debt. So I spent the first year with a lot of my high school friends. It was very fun. My sophomore year rolled around, and I was staying another year. And 5 of my 6 closest friends moved away to go to state schools. And so I remember dropping them off in like early August of that year. And I drove home that day, and I realized I had literally one friend in town. And I just prayed while I was driving, like, God, would you please provide me with community? And over the course of the next few months, God just kind of put in motion everything that's got me to Evergreen now. And it's really cool to be able to put that kind of connection together. But I needed some more funds to pay for my car. So I got a job at Target, and there was a kid working at Target that I hadn't seen in 2 years, but we graduated together, and he remembered my injury, and he remembered how I changed after my injury, and he was a believer himself. And so he went to Riverview right down the street, the church that Christian Kemp used to be at. He just said, hey, we're starting this like little college get together thing. If you're looking for a community, he just like said it offhandedly. And in my head, I'm like, I need this badly. So I went and ended up meeting some of the dudes that were in my wedding that night, and some of the dudes that like I am accountable to and that are some of my best friends now. So through that group, I got connected more with BCM at TCC.
Mm-hmm.
And that group grew over the next year, and basically it ended up splitting up and everyone going back to like their home churches. So there was a group that started at First Baptist Jinx, and there's a group from Evergreen that ended up becoming what is now Reach.
Mm-hmm. That's also the time when you met Janae, isn't it?
That meeting happened in like 2015. So it was a whole year that I was just at TCC, but also in BCM. And then in October of 2016, something happened with my dad that kind of changed the trajectory of the next few years. So I got a call from my mom on October 16th of 2016. I'll never forget it. And I've never heard my mom sound like this, but she was just frantic. She goes, "I need you to get to the hospital right now. Your dad had a stroke." And I was 20 years old. Like, had no clue like what strokes really did to people. Like, I was very oblivious. And so got to the hospital, and my dad seemed to be functioning fine, but the doctors basically told my mom that night, like, this was a really big stroke and he's lucky that he can function, but we'll need to like check for residual effects like in the coming weeks. And so they ended up doing some MRIs and brain scans, and they found what was a blood clot in my dad's brain that had caused him to stroke out. Basically, the doctors told my mom, like, we can't operate on this. It's too deep in there. If we try to, we could nick something and kill him, or nick something, he'll be blind, whatever. So we just kind of have to deal with it. And I just felt super lost at that time. It was just somewhat overwhelming, because in an instant, my dad went from like the breadwinner of our family that was, leading his wife, to now my mom has to help like take care of him, and he can't work because the stroke has like messed with some of his memories and his abilities to like read and do math and that kind of stuff. So like if you talk to him, he would seemingly be fine, but if you asked him to like spell something, he like would spell it wrong every time. Over the next couple months, I kind of just started trying to figure out, okay, I'm in my last year of TCC here. I'm going to need to continue on in school, but there's definitely no way my parents can help me now, and I don't want to go accrue tens of thousands of dollars of debt. And so I just felt like in my prayer times that God was, asking me like, how much do I really trust him? And so I had remembered I had a friend whose dad worked at ORU. And so I called that dad, and he was super excited to hear from me. And he was like, what are you thinking about coming to ORU and whatever? And I was like, well, I don't know. I know it's really expensive, but I hear they have like some good scholarships. And so I proceeded to apply for the whole person scholarship at ORU, which is like a 95% paid scholarship. And they only give out 4 of them to the incoming class every year. So it's really like rare to get the full one, but you can get smaller percentages or whatever. I ended up having to give a speech, and the speech was pretty much what we've been doing right now. Like, they wanted me to share my testimony as to like why I would be a good addition to ORU because of my faith. Yeah. And so kind of shared up until that point. And I'll never forget the phone call, because I was leaving my job and my mom told me that she needed these groceries. I didn't have the money in my bank account, and she didn't have the money in the bank account. I get a phone call, and it's like some random number but it's 918. So I was like, okay, maybe somebody needs to talk to me, whatever. And I answer the phone, and it's this guy, and he's like, "Hi, is this John Crater?" I said, "Yeah." And he proceeds to say, like, "This is so-and-so from ORU financial aid department, and I'm here with the entire financial aid team." And the room like explodes. It's like 20 people. And he goes, "So you've been selected for the full whole person scholarship." And I literally dropped my phone. Like, I was so overwhelmed, like, at God's continued blessing in my life of not knowing how I was going to pay for school, and him being able to provide like that. And so I came home, and my mom was like, "Hey, where are the groceries?" Because I forgot. Like, I forgot to even tell her. Excited. Like, I was so excited. But as parents do, they've also been worried about how I was going to be able to finish school, or, be on my own without their help and that kind of stuff. And so I told them, and we just had this big like sob fest together. I was going to go to ORU the next year, the fall of 2017. So this is the late fall of 2016. So I continued on, super excited to be there, but I wanted to finish at TCC for the last year. And so I went to a game night with some friends, and we invited whoever wanted to come. And we had this friend named Sydney, and she's like, hey, I'm going to bring this girl with me from ORU. I'll never forget this because I literally only thought it happened in like fairy tales, but Sydney walks through this door and like around the corner, and I swear there was like this glow that like followed her. And that woman ends up being who is now my wife, Janae.
Was there music and birds chirping?
No birds chirping, but very like bright lights and like overwhelming. Yeah. And she doesn't like when I tell the story this way because she's like, I was wearing sweatpants and some like a jogger hood.
Well,
like
then
hoodie.
You know she's absolutely drop dead gorgeous.
Yeah,
so she can look like that. And
she looks great in anything. So.
Yeah, I can just picture it. They're like slow motion coming around.
Yeah,
the corner.
hair whips, like everything. Yeah, she's like, awesome. I was wearing.
So like, love at first sight there.
Yeah, I was smitten, and I just really hadn't been concerned with girls for the past probably year or so because I didn't have like the time, seemingly, you know, and the Lord had kind of told me like, this is not a time for you to date or whatever. Like you'll know when you know. And I just didn't think like that happened. You hear that and people tell you that, but it's absolutely true. Anyways, so
it's not true for everybody. I will say that.
Yeah. It can happen a lot of ways. So we ended up playing card games that night, and I just start asking Janae questions, and I really wasn't like trying to pursue her immediately, but I definitely was like, this girl is very attractive and I want to get to know more about her. And so I was asking her questions, and come to find out she's from a homeschool family. She's from Colorado, and her family loves like board games and card games. And so me being the instigator that I can be, I really like tried to challenge her that night, and she'll say like this doesn't happen, but it definitely did. I made her so mad that night that she was like turning bright red because she's like, I don't even know this dude. Like, I don't think she had any clue I was really interested in talking to her, but I definitely like got under her skin and kind of messed with her quite a bit. And so
so you went the route of making her mad so that she would like you.
Yeah, pretty much.
Cool.
You know,
that sounds good.
Well, yeah, like little boys on the playground, what do they do to girls that they like? They, you know, hit them or throw something at them. So
make fun of them, run away.
Yeah, sure. That doesn't change for adults either. So
wow, well, good to know.
Anyways, getting the scholarship at ORU and being able to go there in the fall, I just had this mindset of like, okay, I'm going to this Christian school now. I'm not at TCC anymore. And like, God has continued to provide. And I had an old friend call me from Kanakuk camps, and he was telling me about this verse in Matthew 6 that I had never really noticed before. When he shared it with me, it just resonated with me that so many times, like, I've wondered how things are going to work out and how God was going to provide, whether it was my scholarship or what I was going to do after I broke my leg or how I was going to do the charity work or whatever. But the verse that he shared with me was Matthew 6:33, which says, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these worldly things will be given to you second." And what that means is not that if you seek God that he will give you the desires of his heart, but if you seek God, your heart will become like his. Mm-hmm. And then the things that he desires will become your desires. Mm-hmm. And so God was continually reminding me at multiple times in my life that if I was going to pursue him and just have a relationship with him, whatever I was going to be a part of would be what he wanted me to be doing, because I would be pursuing like-minded things. And so I kind of had that on my mind, and we ended up going to Glorietta for Collegiate Week. That week at Glorietta was super fun, a lot of great memories, but I felt like I was being called into ministry. Mm-hmm. And so I answered that call there and prayed with Paul Lewis, who's the BCM director in Stillwater now, and he was at TCC at the time. And I really think that God like imprinted on me there that ministry could look like a lot of things, but that he wanted me to pursue something. And so I came back in the fall, started going to ORU, taking classes there, and was still trying to work my other job, but I did not like this job. It was a drag on me. And so I just started asking every like pastor I knew, like, hey, do you know anyone looking for like a youth intern? I'd love to be a youth intern. And I had known AJ for a couple years, and he was like, yeah, I'll reach out to some people. And he sends me the contact info for this guy named Drew Wright at First Baptist Jinx. And he met with me a few times, and then he basically offered me a job, and he's like, I can pay you this specific amount every week. And before I could say yes, AJ invited me to trunk or treat here. And while him and I were driving around on the golf cart, he was like, so I know you want to be a youth intern, and I'd love to have you be mine, but I can't pay you. So then I was like, okay, there's this guy that I really know and I love and trust that would want me to intern for him, but he can't pay me.
Yeah.
Then there's this guy that knows me through AJ, but he can pay me. And so I made the decision very poorly just to follow the money. Because at the time, like I've shared, things with my family were starting to get like really, really tight. And so I knew I had to make some kind of money. I couldn't work a job that didn't provide anything.
Now you say you made that decision poorly. Did you stop to pray about it, or were you just like, hey, I'm going to go for the money?
I definitely prayed about it, but most of the time when I make a big decision in my life, I feel like I hear an answer from God, or it's so evident through like what other people tell me. But I didn't really ask anybody's opinion, and I definitely didn't pray about it for that long.
Okay. So you feel like you just kind of jumped the gun and made the decision.
But Drew, if you ever listen to this is not anything against you. This was my decision, and I have a relationship with you because of that decision. So it's a maybe a win-lose type situation, but I wouldn't have a relationship with Drew or the people at First Baptist Jinx if I hadn't made that decision either. So even in my own sin, God can redeem that through other relationships. Right. So going to Jinx, I had talked with Drew at the early December of 2017. And then I was supposed to start January 3rd of 2018. The reason I remember that date is because on December 29th of 2017, Drew's then wife passed away. And she was also pregnant with their first child. I found out about that through the grapevine because obviously Drew wasn't contacting anybody. And so I got back into my school, and then I came to the office on January 3rd. And everybody there is rightfully so very depressed and not knowing, where to go from here. And I met with Cody Brumley, and I'd said, hey, I'm supposed to intern for Drew. And at this point, like, you guys, if you just need help, I'll do it. Even if it's for free. Like, I just feel like I need to be here. And so he was like, okay, I'll talk to some people and I'll get back to you. So I started walking out to my car, and before I could leave the parking lot, he called me. He's like, actually, just come back. And so I talked with Jamie Pendleton, who's the missions pastor there, and they basically hired me. They're like, so Drew's not going to be available for a few months. You're not going to be able to intern for him, but we need somebody to help like lead the youth. Yeah. So with zero experience, I started working at Jinx, and I wasn't the youth pastor or anything. I was literally an intern, but I didn't have like a boss for a couple months. So me and another guy named Ralph, who led worship there, led this youth group by ourselves pretty much for about 5 months. And then once summer came around, Drew came back to the office, and we had met a few times here and there, but summer came and he was ready to kind of resume his duties and started serving under him. But as I was working there, for the first time in my life, started to feel pressure from my job. Like every other job I'd had, I could clock out and not think about it until I was going back. Sure. But this one is like, there are kids that are grieving the loss of their youth pastor's wife. Right. And there are families that don't know how to walk their kids through death and all this other stuff. And I had no experience in any of that.
Right.
And I would do that all day long. And then I would come home and my dad is falling into dementia and just not really my dad anymore. And my mom is trying to take care of him. And because she's taking care of him, finances start getting really, really hard. And so I just found myself constantly trying to rely on my own strength rather than asking God to provide. And even in that year and a half that I worked at this church, there were times that I would come home and our power was out. There were times I would come home and our refrigerator was empty. There were times I would come home, my mom would be crying on the floor in the living room, and my dad would just be like oblivious in the bedroom. And like, I'm trying to go to school full time. I'm working pretty much full time at this church. And then I'm trying to deal with this at home. And I'm dating Janae. Like, all of these things are a lot for me. And so it just got to a place where I wasn't mentally like healthy, and I really wasn't pursuing God. I was just trying to get through the days. But even in my own sin in that, like, there were times, like I said, that we had nothing and we'd go to bed and like the power was out in our house and we'd wake up and the lights were on. And so I'd call the power company and be like, what happened? Like, some anonymous person paid your bill. And so there are people that to this day literally saved my family, and I'll never be able to like look them in the eyes because they're kind enough to do that without wanting any praise or anything like that. So anyways, it got to a place that I really knew like I'm not going to be able to do this job well and go to school and help take care of my family. And so there was a lot that happened, but there was a decision for me to leave that position. And they didn't say, hey, your home life is awful, we're going to fire you or anything like that. Like, I just felt like it was better for me to leave there. And so that was in the spring of 2019. I'm grateful for the relationships I had there, but I made the decision to go ahead and try to find a new job, something that could provide some more. But in that time of working at Bank of Oklahoma, I still felt like I had like let God down. I came home again, and my dad called me David, which is his older brother's name. So it was another kind of moment where I was like, he really isn't even here anymore. At that time, Philip Jackson had taken over Reach, and he was somebody I knew that a lot of people loved, but I didn't really know anything about him. And so I met with Philip. Philip sat just like you have, Joy, and listened to me tell my story. He was the first person I'd felt like in my life that heard all of the sin I had in my life or mistakes I made or whatever, other than my parents, that had like zero judgment to me. As Janae and I were kind of searching for a new church and all this transition of our lives of not being at Jinx, and friends had gone away to college and all this other stuff, I really realized there was like one place and one church that had stayed with us the whole time, and it was Evergreen. Janae and I had been going to Reach, but then we started attending Evergreen on Sundays, and then September of 2019, we joined Evergreen.
And you guys are married at this time now? No, not yet?
No, not yet, but we had been dating for 3 years at that point.
Okay.
So we had talked about marriage, but regardless of whether we were, together or not, we both saw what God was doing here, and just how they had been with me and my family specifically. And my wife comes from a very large church in Colorado and is very weary of pastors and all other stuff. And I'll never forget the first time she heard Michael preach. We got in the car afterwards to go to lunch, and she's like, that's the first time I've ever like heard a sermon and I tracked everything that pastor said. And it's not because clearly Michael doesn't speak in dumbed down language. He uses massive words, but the Holy Spirit like cleared my wife's like ears to be able to fully grasp what was being taught in a way that she had never before. And so her faith began to grow like very quickly, sitting under Michael's teaching. And so it was just another confirmation that that's where I wanted to be. Over the next 6 months, my dad's health really took a drastic turn for the worse. So ultimately, my dad ended up passing away on April 4th of 2020. I'll never forget that morning either, because my mom came in and I would have thought my mom would have been a puddle on the floor. And she came and knocked on my door and just said, "Hey, your dad's passed, and I think you should go like spend some time with him." And that was just such a cool reminder of my parents' faith and my mom's faith, that my dad may not have been present in this world anymore, but my mom was so confident where he was that I don't think I saw her cry that day. It was a surreal day. And it was a day that I got to witness to a lot of my other family, because I have other family in town that aren't walking with the Lord. And they even asked me and my mom and Janae, like, "Why aren't you more upset about this?" And was able to like share the gospel with them at that time of like, we know where he's at. Like, I'm 100% positive that I will see him again and that he's made whole. So
yeah, and especially when you're walking with a family member who is like, you see them deteriorating for a long time.
Oh yeah.
And then them passing and knowing that they were believers, like it's a joyous occasion, because now we know that they're healed, you know, they're feeling better, they're fully there, and even more than they ever were. Yeah. And so it can be something that we can celebrate instead of grieve. I mean, we do still grieve, of course. Yeah. But it can be a celebration as well.
Yeah, it definitely was that day. And, you know, I got to sit and just talk about my dad with a lot of people that came by the house that day. But I was reminded that day of a scripture, Philippians 4:6-7. It says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." And the petition I had made to God multiple times in the previous years was that he would take my dad away. Not because my dad was any kind of overburden or whatever, but I hated seeing him like that. And it's a really weird thing to pray for God to take your parents' life, but I was doing it out of a merciful standpoint. Sure. That I didn't want to see my dad in pain like that anymore. And so, you know, it took a couple years, but he ultimately answered that. But he had also worked the timing out that my wife and my mom and I had resolved any pain. And so his passing was a joyous occasion, like you said. Yeah. A couple months after that, I had finally saved enough money, as my wife would say, to buy her an engagement ring. I finally asked her to marry me, and then we ended up joining our life group that fall. Then we got married November 28th of 2020. When we joined our life group, I did it because I knew that I saw it as like a instrumental part of Evergreen, but I did not know like how important these people would become to me. Yeah. And really the last thing about my story is, as a son that's lost his dad and you have this mom that's still around, you want her to be able to like enjoy whatever life she has left. And my mom is nowhere near death. I feel like she's going to live to be 110. But while she was taking care of my dad, she wasn't capable of going to church every week. I mean, getting my dad ready was a big chore. So she really had lost a lot of friends and community because she had to be isolated, taking care of him so much. And so the big prayer I had was that God would bring her here with us and that she would feel comfortable at Evergreen, not because we're here, but because she sees what he's doing here. And so she just like has fallen in love with the leadership here and the teaching. And it's been cool to see her join Sunday school. And so that's been a big answer to prayer as well, that I don't have to try to carry my mom's spirituality on my own. There's a whole church to help us with that. So
yeah, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. If there's somebody listening that has an idea of their life and they even had plans and everything's going their way, and all of a sudden something happens and knocks their plans off the rails, what is it that you'd want to say to them?
When things don't go the way you think they should, remember that God is always in control. And no matter the circumstance, he knows best. I mean, you guys heard my story, and I multiple times just question God. And without him literally breaking my leg and forcing me to go the way that I have, I wouldn't have probably met my wife. I probably wouldn't have the faith I have. I wouldn't have the community I have. All these things despite our limited understanding, He knows what's best for us.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to today's episode. If you have any questions or want to hear about our church, please visit our website at evergreenbc.org. That is evergreenbc.org.